They were out early one morning, panning in the stream for gold, surrounded by the rising mountains. Old prospector with a tale for two, he brushed around in the pan, and pointing out what lay within was ordinary sand. He began with a story about 20 years before, and a younger man who sought his fortune. With a tear or two he told of searching for his treasure, but making known the gold he sought was ordinary pleasure. There were years of doing without, and there were years of plenty. I started thinking that life was never steady, excepting when the bills came in and I had no money to pay. Whiskey had never tasted better ordinarily. He concluded his story as it filled the air with a laugh, saying how he found the Lord and Savior, and how he found the river of life by which his day unfolds, and pointing out what stands within is not ordinary gold, and pointing out what stands within is not ordinary gold. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. Through His word we can see His wonders, signs and miracles of His love. We can return His love with devotion, standing on His word before all men. We are His beloved and His chosen, walking in this life renewed with peace. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. upon His promises. Through His Word, we can see His wonders, signs and miracles of His love. We can return His love with devotion, standing on His word before all men. We are His beloved and His chosen, walking in this life renewed with peace. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. Trust in God, believe upon His promises.
All right, God bless everybody. Happy Mother's Day. My name is Mark Wallace. This is True North Studio, and today my topic is the perfectly imperfect mom. Now, what can I share on this beautiful Mother's Day that will bless you amazing moms, as well as all of you who came from a mom? Well, today let's back away from that perfect selfie-snapping social media mama for a second and step back into the real world. Let's accept our wonderful humanity and realize that in all of history there has never been, nor will there ever be, a perfect mom. But there have been some pretty good ones. There have been some pretty great ones. You don't have to attain perfection to become that perfect mom with the perfect kids. You just need to be good enough. All you need to do is just keep being the amazing, perfectly imperfect mom that you already are. So today I'm going to talk about I could talk about the unobtainable perfection of the virtuous woman of valor in Proverbs 31. I've done that before. Who can find a virtuous woman, for her price is far above rubies? Proverbs 31:10. And because perfectly imperfect moms pass on their pearls of wisdom. That's why I could have talked about that. I could talk about Eve, the mother of all living, or Sarah, the mother of all believers, or Mary, the mother of the Christ. Perfectly imperfect moms make their mistakes but keep getting back up. Maybe we could analyze brainy scholar moms like Madame Curie, the mother of modern physics, who twice won the Nobel Prize, and her daughter Irene earned a Nobel Prize too. That apple didn't far too fall from that tree. See, perfectly imperfect moms live their callings and help their children do the same. Now it would be fun to mention the fascinating life of Josephine Baker, born to a mom who had been a slave and her seldom mentioned white dad. She grew up hard but pushed herself to become a dancer, a singer, an actress, a world traveler, even a World War II spy. But Josephine thought of her greatest accomplishment as being the single mother of 12 adopted children, all of different races and colors from all over the world, which she called her rainbow tribe. That's Josephine Baker. Now perfectly imperfect moms find a way to live above racism and live and train their tribes to grow up to be good people. Now, we could talk about J.K. Rowling, who, while struggling to feed her child as a single mother on welfare, began to envision and write a story about a magical boy that she called Harry Potter. Now her net worth is more than that of the Queen of England. Perfectly imperfect moms keep their dreams alive during the toughest of times. I could give a tribute to my wife's 1984 research paper on the mothers of the kings, where she shows that not every good king had a good mother, but that every good queen mother had a son who became a great and godly king. Perfectly imperfect moms help their kids to grow up and to be upright and godly people. Now, we could talk about the super sexy Bathsheba, who became queen after having a torrid affair with King David. Then they had her husband murdered to cover up her unplanned pregnancy. She also had to manipulate the queen's court pretty hard to get her son Solomon crowned king instead of his older brothers from other mothers. The beautiful but flawed Bathsheba was the one who passed on the virtuous woman song of Proverbs 31. She passed it on to her son Solomon, who wrote it down for you. So perfectly imperfect moms get stuff done, one way or the other. Now maybe we just talk about the mothers of the apostles like Simone and Mary, the wife of Cleopas, who along with her friends Mary Magdalene, the poor little rich girl, or Joanna, the wife of King Herod's treasurer, supported Jesus and his apostles for a full year as they moved the word over Israel and set us all up for the new birth that came on the day of Pentecost. So, perfectly imperfect moms can be world changers. You don't have to be perfect. Then there's Job's wife. She helped her man become the richest man in that region of the world. She bore him 10 children. 10. But all hell broke loose in their life, and together they lost all their businesses, all their money, and all 10 of their children died on the same day. Now her grief must have been bottomless. Only 10 words are credited to her. Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. She said that to her husband. Guess I should put my microphone on. Sorry about you out there. Thank you. So curse God and die. And they both went on to believe God to have 10 more children, as well as doubling their wealth. Now, so it's pretty good. This woman was, Job's wife was something. See, perfectly imperfect mothers may express their pain in times of tremendous grief, but they never forget the goodness of God. Now, Judges 4 and 5 calls Deborah a mother in Israel. Now, being a mom is a full-time job, as a lot of you know. But having to go to work can sometimes complicate motherhood, as most of you know. Now, what if besides caring for your kids, your job has you on horseback, leading 10,000 troops into battle and only staying alive because of God's revelation? Imagine knowing that unless you alone decide to act, an entire nation of people will be annihilated. Along with being a great mom, Deborah was a judge, a prophet, a warrior, a woman of prayer, and a singer-songwriter. She trusted the Spirit of God to give her wisdom. She was brave and beautiful. She even credits other women with helping her to win a certain battle. Perfectly imperfect mothers are fierce, unstoppable, yet cultured and loving. Now, have you ever had a woman who you called mom that was not really your mom? You see, the Apostle Paul did. He wrote in Romans 16:13, salute Rufus, chosen in the Lord, and his mother and mine. See, Paul's surrogate mom, a woman who treated him like a son, was probably the wife of Simon of Cyrene, the man who was forced to carry the cross for Jesus. Mark 15:21. He called this woman mom. Now, it's quite possible that Paul, because he rejected Judaism the way it was, that his family disowned him, which would have been pretty normal at that time. So this woman loved him like a son. Now, perfectly imperfect moms welcome others into their family at times, and they're better to us than our own moms. Some of you have experienced that. Now, I could give a nod to my mother-in-law, Mama Rose, and her famous al dente spaghetti with marinara sauce. Or we might showcase your Aunt Mildred's blue ribbon tapioca pudding. You see, now these are all wonderful ladies, worthy of further study, but today I'm going to narrow it down to just 2 women who remind me of you beautiful, imperfectly perfect mothers. And today we're going to talk about 2 mothers who each in the midst of their own personal hell found a way to shine just a little bit brighter. Today I will highlight two perfectly imperfect mothers who are seldom mentioned on Mother's Day, but whose examples are still changing lives today. So, the single mother of Zarephath. And this is from King 17, 1 Kings 17 and Luke chapter 4. So while scavenging for enough wood to make a small fire, to prepare the last of her food for her starving son, this amazing single mom encounters a stranger who asks her for a bite to eat, food she just couldn't afford to spare. Now, didn't he know that there was a famine in the land? Didn't he know that everyone in Israel was starving? Didn't he know that she didn't even have enough food for herself and her dying son? Who did this guy think he was? Well, let's find out. In 1 Kings 17:1, and Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto King Ahab, As the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. In other words, it's not going to rain until I say it's going to rain again. So God told the prophet that it was not going to rain for a few years, and there was going to be the drought of droughts, a famine of famines, and this would mean no crops, which means no food, which means death for the poor, the sick, and the less fortunate. You know, this prophet would not make King Ahab look good at all. Now Elijah went and told this unwelcome news to the spineless king of Israel, who is openly dominated by his evil wife, Jezebel. And after delivering the message to Ahab, and Jezebel, he was told by God to run like the wind. So he gave the message and then split. Now verses 8 and 9. And the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, Arise, get thee to Zarephath, which belongeth to Zidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. On this Mother's Day, let's unpack this pregnant verse to set up our story. I love how God gave similar revelation to two people. He gave similar revelation to two people. He told Elijah to go to hide out in Zarephath, and a husbandless woman would take care of him. Now, this does not mean that he would be a friend with benefits. This was survival, baby. This was survival. God also commanded a certain widow woman, the one we just read about, to sustain this man of God. But now they had to find each other. And did you know that the area God told him to hide out in was near the birthplace of the evil queen Jezebel? You see, now talk about hiding in plain sight. Now many of you think of Jezebel as being seed of the serpent. And you probably also remember that to maintain her power, she recently had all the prophets of Israel rounded up and killed, or so she thought. Did you hear what I just said? She, to maintain power, rounded up everybody who called themselves a prophet in Israel and had them killed. Now, the devil knows that if you can silence people with the Spirit of God, you can control the world. Why do you think certain world leaders today still try to imprison or kill or silence believers even today? I want you to notice that even though this woman may not have clearly understood what God commanded her to do, she was obedient to God's still small voice as it unfolded to her. Revelation usually comes in bite-sized chunks as you're willing to handle it. It usually doesn't come in one big meal. It's a bite at a time. So let's see the imperfection, let's see the imperfect perfection of this mother that I'm talking about. Verse 10. So he arose and went to Zarephath. This is Elijah. And he went to Zarephath, which is a city. And when he came to the gate of the city, behold, the widow woman was there gathering of sticks. And he called to her and said, Fetch me, I pray thee, a little water in a vessel that I might drink. Now there would have been many, many starving widows in Israel during the famine of Elijah. So why did Elijah pick out this single mom? Somehow he knew this penniless mother would be the one who would believe with him to ride out the famine and help him stay alive and safe. You all have had people that you gravitated to at the worst of times. Elijah calls out to her and he asks her, "Hey, bring me a little bit of water." And not only was this appropriate, this was also a test. There was nothing wrong with a man asking a woman for water. You saw Jesus do that in the Gospels. Totally normal. And it was her duty to give it to him. Okay? And but this is also going to be a test. Verse 11. And as she was going to fetch it, he called to her and said, "Bring me, I pray thee, a morsel of bread in thine hand." So I don't just want some water, I want some food. So just as she was walking away, he pulls a Columbo. Remember the 1970s TV detective walk-away catchphrase? "Oh, just one more thing." So as she's walking away to fetch in some water, he says, "Oh, one more thing. While you're at it, would you mind bringing me a little morsel of bread too? I'm a little famished. My stomach is talking to me." You know, and this is where he finds out she is the one. Verse 12, and she said, "As the Lord thy God liveth, I have not a cake, but an handful of meal in a barrel and a little oil in a cruse. And behold, I'm gathering 2 sticks that I may go and dress it for me and my son, that we may eat it and die." Now that's pretty desperate words. You know, I'll bring you some water, but I have just enough food from our last meal. And after we eat this, my son and I are probably going to die. Okay. Now I love it. I love it. She doesn't know this guy from Adam. She is honest and seems to be almost fatalistic in her answer. "Look, buddy, God knows that I have just enough bread in my house to feed me and my son our last meal before we literally starve to death because of the famine. And you want me to bring you a morsel of this bread?" Now here's a thought. Here's a thought. Maybe she's testing him back to see if he's the one that God told her about. And this is just a thought. Because remember, God told both of them, right? He commanded her to do this. 13. And Elijah said unto her, "Fear not, go and do thou as thou hast said, but make me thereof a little cake first. First. Make me a cake first, and bring it unto me, and after make for thee and thy son." So go and bring me some bread first. Go and cook that up and bring it to me. So she had to go home and come all the way back to where he was sitting there near the gate of this and bring her the last piece of bread that she was going to feed to her starving son and to herself, who was also starving. That's quite an ask. That's quite an ask. Most women would say, well, we can't use that in mixed company here. Okay, verse 14. For thus saith the Lord God of Israel, the barrel of meal shall not waste, neither shall the cruse of oil fail until the day that the Lord sendeth rain upon the earth. In other words, you do this for me, and the grain that's in your containers will never empty. It'll just keep replenishing until I say that the rain's going to stop. Now, how many great events in the Bible have been preceded by the words, fear not? Fear not. How many great things do we do for God and for our children because we live without fear? And I know a lot of you ladies, you live without fear. You've done things that I couldn't dream of doing. Elijah tells her to take her last handful of flour and oil and cook him a small loaf of bread and bring it to him. He also tells her, after you bring me the last of your food, then go back home and cook a meal for your boy and yourself because your grain bins are going to be full. Now, do you think she had to trust him to do this? Now, that didn't make any sense. But it makes all the sense in the world if you trust that God has already supplied your need. Philippians 4:19. Verse 15, and she went and did according to the saying of Elijah. And she and he and her house did eat many days, and the barrel of meal wasted not, neither did the cruse of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by Elijah. She saved the prophet, and he saved her and the boy. God put these two people together to help each other during the very worst of times. Have you ever had somebody like that? If you haven't, you've always had a God like that. And that's what's cool. That's the whole lesson here, really, is God supplies our need. In the next chapter, Elijah saves 100 prophets that Obadiah hid from the evil queen Jezebel. This is just mind-blowing. So this woman also saved, because of her action, she helped save those 100 prophets as well. You see, as this perfectly imperfect mother cared for the man of God, indirectly she saved maybe 100 people. Indirectly, she probably saved the only other 100 people in the whole country of Israel, maybe in the whole rest of the world, who had the Spirit of God. You think, what? That doesn't make any sense. Well, it was not like today, where everybody who gets born again has the Spirit of God. At that day and time, just because you were a part of Israel did not mean you had the Spirit of God. It was only certain people had the Spirit of God throughout all of history until the day of Pentecost. So this is huge what she did and what that prophet did. You see, and here's a fun fact, and this is amazing. Did you know that the first person that Jesus mentions after receiving the Holy Spirit, the first person that he reflects upon after his temptations in the wilderness with the devil, the very first individual teaching example that he ever used to flesh out his very first public teaching was this husbandless single mother from Zarephath. Isn't that crazy? This was the first person that he thought of and taught about. After when he starved himself for 40 days, was tempted of the devil, and then he did his first teaching in his hometown of Nazareth. In Luke 4:24, you don't have to turn there, 25 Jesus said, but I tell you of a truth, many widows were in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the heavens were shut up 3 years and six months. That's how long that famine lasted, 3 years and 6 months. Imagine not working, not having any money for 3 years and 6 months. That's what it would be like. How poor would you be after 3 years and 6 months of no income? No rain, no income in Israel. Okay? And verse 26. So it was a great famine throughout the land, but unto none of them was Elias sent, save unto Sarepta, the city of Sidon, unto a woman that was a widow. That was Jesus' first teaching. Now when Jesus sort of tongue-in-cheek reproved his townspeople for not receiving him well, and they didn't, by mentioning the care and hospitality of the widow of Zarephath, like Jezebel, his townspeople tried to kill him. Imagine your first teaching in your hometown. You go there, and the people of Nazareth, who Jesus grew up with, he went to temple with, went to synagogue with, played with their kids, they commenced to drag Jesus to the edge of town and try to throw him off a cliff to his death. But like Elijah, he slipped through their grasp and he walked away to teach another day. The word spoken at the exact right time will expose darkness in places that should be light. revelation and the fitly spoken word has at times saved your life and the life of your children. Like I said earlier, if you want to control the world, you must first silence people with the Spirit of God. And I know you well enough to know that nobody puts baby in the corner. See, well, the famine went on for 3.5 years, but so did the miraculous daily reappearing of grain and oil in the woman's storage containers. Where do you think Jesus got the idea of feeding 5,000 people with just a couple of loaves of bread? It just kept reappearing, just kept reappearing, just kept reappearing. It came from this. What a great example. What do you think God's done for you at times? God has supplied things for you that you're so used to being blessed by God now that it's not like mind-blowing. You just expect it now. And you should. You should. This was an amazing single mom. I would love to hear how God has supplied your needs at times so that you could in turn help other people. God sent Elijah to care for the single mom, and God also directed her to care for him. We all know that as we give, we receive. The man of God, Elijah, was sent to this particular perfectly imperfect woman, a mother who in the midst of her personal hell was able to still hear the call of God and help the prophet Elijah hide out and believe long enough to stay alive, long enough to save Israel. I mean, this woman and this prophet literally saved Israel. Perfectly imperfect mothers are givers, no matter how hard life gets. Reminds me of you. And now we're going to hit the second example. And this is the mixed race woman of Sidon. And this is Matthew 15 and Mark 7. And finally, we're going to hit a record that's so timely, I have to push back an unruly tear. And this is a lesson to remember when you feel like an outsider, when you don't feel like you fit with man or God. And we've all felt that way at times. And Matthew 15:21, then Jesus went thence and departed into the coast of Tyre and Sidon. Now this is the same area that we just spoke about many hundreds of years earlier with the woman of Zarephath. That's in Sidon, okay? So it's sort of cool that these are both from the same area. So Tyre and Sidon are cities at the very northern tip of Israel in a beautiful area near the Mediterranean Sea. Now it would be called Lebanon, okay? But at that time, it was sort of at the very northern tip of Israel, and they never fully took that land. It was sort of a mixture between believers and unbelievers. They tried to take it, but they never fully had it as part of their land. It was, but it wasn't, okay? And so this is a beautiful part of Israel, right next to the Mediterranean Sea. I mean, how would you like to live right next to the coast? Nice, you see. But not all that glitters is gold. And we all know that. Verse 22, and behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast and cried unto him. Now this is talking about Jesus now. We're not talking about Elijah anymore, okay? You got to shift gears. You got to move up another 1,000 years or something, okay? And so this woman from Canaan, okay, not Israel, okay, she cried unto him. So she sees Jesus walking through this town, and she yells out to him, and she cries out, have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with the devil. Okay, now most people don't want to even admit that when your son's a little crazy or your daughter's a little crazy, right? Ask my mom. No. You know, while Jesus and his team were out speaking the word and doing good, a desperate mother started following them around town and started screaming for Jesus to help her. This woman was also an unbeliever, or so they thought. Verse 26, Mark 7:26 calls her a Syrophoenician. You don't need to turn to Mark, but He calls her a Syrophoenician, which means she was of mixed race. Okay? And to the Judeans, she was a mongrel. A mongrel. And she looked different, she dressed different, and she had a funny accent. Okay? This perfectly imperfect mother knew she was an outsider. She knew she probably didn't fit in with Jesus and his apostles, but that was not going to stop her from trying to get some help for her mentally sick daughter. Obviously, nothing else had worked up to this point. She knew that Jesus was probably the last resort to help her sick daughter. And the fact that she knew that her daughter was vexed with the devil, must have been so obvious that it didn't take discerning the spirits. Now, we've all seen kids sort of like this, totally whacked out and out of control. Not just after Halloween candy, okay? And I remember one time my wife, in between my son and my daughter, we had a kid, she was substitute teaching, and a kid walked up to her. She had a big pregnant belly, and the kid walked up to her and said, "Your baby's dead." And she thought, she didn't say, "You stupid kid, get back on the bus," or in the museum or wherever they were. Well, it turned out, we lost that baby, and the baby was dead at that time. That was 2 days before she gave birth. So how would a kid know that information? It's possession. And why would a kid say that? You see, so it's sort of weird. So there are kids who have troubles, okay? And this mom knew this. We don't know what it meant for her to know her daughter was possessed, but she knew it. And having a kid that has troubles isn't always someone else's kids who has the big problems. Sometimes our own kids are problems. Again, ask my mom. Verse 23, but he answered her not a word. So, how would you like to be yelling at Jesus for him, asking him to help you, and then he just ignores you? Imagine. Because we think Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world, whether yellow, black, or white. They're all precious in his sight. Everybody thinks that, right? Well, just imagine Jesus totally ignoring you like you did not even exist. Have you ever felt that way? You ever had somebody just ignore you, just blow you off like you didn't exist? Have you ever felt like an outsider because of something you have done or said in the past? Because of your clothing? Maybe you didn't have the freshest styles on, or worse, because of how you were born. You ever been rejected because of what you looked like? How you were born? It's a sad place to live, but watch how Jesus and this perfectly imperfect mother deal with what today we would call systematic racism or discrimination that's embedded in the laws and culture of the society of that day. I know it's not a popular term now, but I'm using it because this record shows it. With the Son of God and all the apostles, which we'll get to in a second. Okay, it's hard for us to picture this. Mark 7:26 also says that this mixed race, pagan unbeliever woman besought him, which in the Greek means she grilled him. She is pushing hard. She's asking the Christ some very direct and very blunt questions. You ever been blown off and you kept pushing? So, the woman says, so they say you're the healer, the savior of the world. You going to help me too? I see you helping hundreds of people. I see healings and miracles. All I want is a moment of your time. I just want to taste. My daughter needs some help up in here. This is not those scamming street kids that surround you in third world countries. This is not the professional beggars that you see on every street corner around rush hour time traffic lights. This is the voice of a desperate and persistent mother. This is like that mom in a war-torn country desperately trying to get the American soldiers' attention and get some food for her starving kids as the U.S. ground vehicles rumble past. We've all seen those movies. Maybe you were one of those people driving one of those vehicles when the mothers are screaming at the side of the road. Verse 23, and his disciples came to him and besought him, begging him, saying, "Send her away, for she crieth after us." So now who's blowing this woman off? And they're doing this in front of her. How would you feel? How would you feel? The apostles almost have halos, in all the pictures, right? They're telling her, "Jesus, get rid of this woman. We can't stand her following us around anymore." Loud enough for her to hear. First, she's ignored by Jesus. And now the apostles reject her. Why? She doesn't look like them. She doesn't talk like them. She isn't of the same religion as them. She's mixed race, mixed religion woman. Okay? And Jesus and the disciples, they were so irritated that this woman was following them day after day. This wasn't just one meeting. Every day she would find where they were out healing people and teaching the word, and she would just scream and scream and scream and get louder and louder and louder. And they demanded Jesus, "Get rid of her. God knows." They tried to get her to leave, but she wouldn't leave. She wouldn't leave. How bold do you have to be for the Son of God to tell you to get lost? All the apostles. I mean, we all someday want to talk with all the apostles, right? After the gathering and all that. Yeah, I want to meet them all. How cool will that be? But they rejected this woman. This mom was annoying. This mom was loud. This mom was brassy. She was attracting attention. Imagine just doing a teaching and somebody busting in and just screaming, "Help me, help me, help me, I want to help my daughter. She's possessed. She's crazy." Ma'am, can you wait till after the meeting? Some of you have experienced these kind of things. What do? Well, the words the disciples use, "she crieth after us," is the Greek word krazo. Krazo, which is the word that sounds like the harsh, throaty, grating, obnoxious song of a raven. You ever heard raven? I just heard one this morning when I was in my front yard. They're It's like, you hate having a flock of those in your yard. Come on, give me some robins or finches or something. But you ravens get away. Well, that's how they sound. They just, it's crusty and crackly. Well, this woman had screamed so much for so long, for so many days, that her voice was just cracking. Sounded like, I got to get a drink here. Sounded like the throaty scream, croak of a raven. Day after day, this lady yelled so loud to get Jesus' attention that she lost her voice almost, and her voice was just cracking and hoarse. "Jesus, please help me. Please notice me. Please help my possessed daughter. Please help her. She needs your help, please." No mother wants to say that. No mother wants to admit that. People think it's a reflection on them sometimes, and it's not. No wonder they were sick of her. This is day after day. Imagine this loud, different looking woman following you around, screaming for help. Imagine her busting into your church or fellowship. I guarantee there'd be ushers to haul her out in most churches. Right? Oh yeah. Yeah. Verse 24. But he answered and said, "Hey, lady, I'm not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel." So he finally answers her and his apostles. I'm not sent to anybody except for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. This comment by Jesus was addressed both to her and to the apostles and to the disciples. It was true that he was sent to heal and gather the children of Israel who had lost their way. Read Matthew 10:6. That's who God told him to save, right? We think, oh, he's a savior to everybody in the world. No, he was sent to save Israel. It's sort of hard to comprehend because we think of Jesus as being different, okay? But he knew he was just sent to Israel. Everybody knew it too. This woman knew it. But she didn't care. She didn't accept it. Okay? She was first ignored by Jesus himself. Then she was asked to leave the party by the disciples. Now Jesus tells her she is not part of the club. She is not invited to the party because she is a mixed race, mixed religion, mixed up looking single mom with a mixed up daughter. You know, how would you feel? How would you feel? You ever felt like that? Just totally rejected by the person you thought could help you. It's a horrible place to be. As harsh as it seems, Jesus was telling the truth. Jesus was telling the truth here. If you were a good Judean boy trying to live by the law, which he did perfectly, she did not belong. You ever felt that way? You ever felt like you did not belong? Like you did not fit in society? You ever been treated like an outsider by people who talked love? We love you, man, just not now, okay? And she knew the game, but she did not care. Her mission to help her daughter was bigger than religion. You see, this desperate mother who only wanted help for her spiritually tormented daughter assumed that God was big enough for everyone, even if these men did not understand it yet. Who was one of those men? Jesus. Mark 7:24 says that Jesus was then whisked away into a safe house to protect him, from the growing crowd of people and from this crazy lady. Now, so they had a place. They had places where they would stop because sometimes the crowd would start pressing in and they had to get Jesus out of there. These apostles really protected Jesus. It wasn't like you thought where everybody just was gentle and kind. And I mean, some people, when they want something, they get aggressive. Okay? And some people who hate you because of truth, they will try to kill you, which you've already read about. They had a safe house, and they threw Jesus in a secret room inside this safe house to keep him safe from all the people who were starting to gather around and from this crazy mom. But you know something? She found him. She found him. Matthew 15:25. Then came she and worshiped him, saying, Lord, help me. Somehow this woman crashed the gates, got past security, the apostles, and burst into the room where Jesus was and threw herself on the floor at his feet. This was very dramatic and very inappropriate. You see, that took some giant lady balls. This mixed race, Gentile, unbeliever, mongrel of a mother looked Jesus in the eyes and begged him, Lord, help me with my daughter. Her daughter, her voice was almost gone now, but her heart was still on the mission. Her expectation was still on fire. 26. But he answered and said, it's not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to the dogs. Did Jesus just call this woman a dog? I think he did. I think he did. How much do you have to put up with sometimes to get your need met? Sometimes it's a lot more than you're willing to do. fact, a lot of times you have to do a lot more than you're willing to do. You see, now imagine, to add insult to injury, this was her final chance to get help for her daughter. She had snuck past the apostles, busted into his secret room, and put all her cards on the table face up. She opened her heart totally this time. It was just her and the Christ. Now, once again, the Christ seems to blow her off, but this time just directly, eyeball to eyeball, face to face. Most people would have quit by now. Not her. Even Jesus had room to grow. Jesus never stopped growing. Did you know that? He never stopped learning. He never stopped learning. You know, getting called a dog was more of a cut in the first century Israel than it is now. It meant you were an unwelcome scavenger. You ate scraps and you ate dead animals. You were filthy, and you were not allowed in the house. That's what a dog was. Nobody had dogs for pets in Israel. Nobody. Dogs just ran around outside and just ate whatever junk was thrown out in the streets. Today, being called a dog, especially with 2 G's, is a term of endearment, especially if you're a rapper or a Cleveland Browns fan, right? You see? A full-grown dog was rejected by everyone in Israel, but dogs still followed people around. You ever notice that? You ever seen that? People can kick dogs and get, they can reject them, and they're going to keep coming back for some food, right? You see? That's how this woman seemed. Somehow dogs want to be around people, even if people don't want to be around the dogs. Now here's a lesson in believing, folks. Here's a lesson in believing. Now I'm going to throw you a curveball. The word dogs in this interchange is actually the word puppies. Jesus actually just called this woman a puppy. Now that's different than being called a dog. It's like dog light, okay? And so, because I know a lot of you have been taught that the Judeans and Israel did not allow dogs in the house and did not allow them. That's not fully true. They allowed puppies to come in and play with the kids. Okay? And here's a twist. At that time in Israel, parents would sometimes allow children to play with and feed the puppies of those nasty, ugly, dirty, filthy adult dogs. But when the pups grew up, they were never again allowed in the house. So that's why these dogs would always keep coming back. They remembered these people who were nice to them, and now they're not nice, but maybe they'll be nice again. You know how dogs think. Well, maybe you don't want to know. Jesus was calling this woman a pup. Okay? Being called a puppy is still sort of a cut. It's not quite as much of a cut as being called a full-grown bitch or a mangy female dog. Okay? Now this pagan woman uses Jesus' puppy example against him to strengthen her case. Now watch this. I don't think I would even be able to think as quick as this lady, but she knew this is her last chance. I love how she does not quit. She does not quit on her dream. 27, and she said, remember Jesus said, hey, we don't feed the dogs in Israel. And she goes, truth, Lord, truth, yet the dogs or the puppies eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table. Okay, now Mark 7:28 tells us that the puppy masters were the children. Okay, so they would have, how kids play tea and they eat, and they'd have their own little snacks. So during their snacks was when they could play with these little puppies, and they would throw little scraps of their food to the little tiny dogs. Okay, they're the puppy masters. And so she throws that back on Jesus. He goes, we don't feed the dogs. She goes, but he goes, even the puppy masters will feed the dogs the food that falls from their table. Now, I love the verbal exchange and the mental imagery here. She's going tit for tat with the master. Now, nobody thought better than the Christ. Nobody had a quicker mind than the Christ. Nobody could talk more sane and sharp and truth than the Christ could. But this woman's starting to match him here. She's going tit for tat. She's using his example back against him. Okay? And she's not missing a verbal step. She is keeping up with the Christ. She is totally in sync with what he's saying, because she has to be. Jesus seemed to be enjoying this exchange, but also knew she was desperate for help, or she wouldn't have busted into his private room. As emotional and rejected and victimized as she may have felt at that moment, she buried it and allowed her mission to help her possessed daughter. It outweighed this built-in prejudice that was in Israel. From what I can tell, that's the attitude of asking that all you great mothers have. Verse 28, then Jesus answered and said unto him, O woman, great is thy faith. Imagine the Christ telling you that. Man, you got big believing, woman. Be it unto thee even as thou wilt. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. That woman got healed right at that second. Jesus now called this amazing lady an endearing term. Instead of dog or pup, he calls her woman. He treats her like a person. He saw beneath her looks, beyond her race, beneath her culture, even beyond her religion. He noticed the one thing that separates the haves from the have-nots. Jesus pointed out the single thing that it takes for any of us, any mom, any person, to get deliverance, and that is faith or believing or conviction. Let's just call it grit. To have the ability to maintain focus on your goal while taking a beating. That's the lesson here. To see yourself or to see others beyond their skin color or religion or culture or background or looks or their wild children and to notice their believing is also a lesson. Grit, faith, believing is the formula to success for you perfectly imperfect moms, no matter where you came from or how crazy your kids are at the time. So don't take no for an answer. Keep pushing. Never stop until you get what you came for. Keep pushing until someone calls security. Push past security then. Imperfectly perfect moms never give up. Perfectly imperfect moms go to God in the name of Jesus Christ. Now I want to close this Mother's Day teaching with a poem I recently wrote the other day for all of you lovely ladies, and I adopted it from the virtuous woman of Proverbs 31, and I've included the verse numbers in the text. And this is how I picture all you perfectly imperfect mothers. Our virtuous woman, or finding our virtuous woman. And we've searched high and low, but she's harder to find than diamonds or rubies or gold that's refined. She's a lady of refuge, a safe place in the storm. Hard work and big love is always her norm. She always works smart with her heart. She does lead, leaving no stone unturned. She cares for our need. Her candle it burns in a strong, selfless way. She cares for our needs all the time, every day. With brains she is blessed. She is smart and resourceful. Her strength seems to grow. Her gifts, they're not mortal. She is sexy and knows it, a modern-day hero. Our woman of valor is never a zero. When she makes up her mind, many things she gets done. She pours out her life to those who have none. She makes sure we are healthy, protected, and safe. She is fearless and bold. Her heart's in a good place. She takes care of herself. She's a beacon of health. She expects nothing less than our God-given wealth. With her we improve, advance, and evolve. Our virtuous woman is fully resolved. She finds ways to bring profit and honor and strength. She wears love like a garment, its color and length. When she opens her mouth, wise words we do hear. Kind talk is her habit, we've nothing to fear. She never wastes time. She cares for her household. Her children and friends are blessed. She's so bold. Many others do great things, but to us she excels. With her we break through the hard gates of hell. She knows that her kindness can be mistaken for weak, and that beauty alone is not all that unique, but her big love for God and her service to others is what many will speak of to sisters and brothers. We reward her life's work. We notice her love. Her life makes a difference. She's a gift from above. We love her like crazy. What more can we do? Our virtuous woman is found, and that woman is you. Happy Mother's Day to all you perfectly imperfect mothers. I love you. God bless.